Audit and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Here.
Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Alvarez-Rosales.
Here.
Director Peterson.
Here.
Director Jakes.
Here.
Judge Chevrolet was called away. She won't be here today. Chairman Silva.
Here.
The committee has 6 members present for a quorum.
Our first order of business today is the approval of the committee minutes of January 15, 2020. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Will the Secretary?
Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jakes.
Abstain.
That's right. Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes and 1 abstention by Reverend Jakes.
You know what?
You weren't here. That's right. So there's two abstentions, both of the reverends. Thank you.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Jeremy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Fine, Chief Financial Officer. And I'll be walking through the December results. With regard to December revenues, we see positive favorability on the fare box and pass lines. We see some benefit again from the late Thanksgiving holiday, where some of the passes were activated later, than usual. So those ticked over from November to early December. So overall, we see fare and pass totals up almost $5 million for the month of December. We see, again, that 50% haircut on the reduced fare subsidy showing up as $1.2 million drag on the December revenues. Non-fare box totals continue to do well with almost $2 million of positive variance at 1.8 million. So that leaves us about $5.5 million to the positive for December revenues. And we'll talk about how that dovetails into the revenues for year to date here in a moment. Because of the positive variance, we see average fare up quite a bit for the month, and we see free rides up about 200,000 for the month of December. Year-to-date numbers, we see fare box down, but passes up about 6 million down for fare box and over 3 million for passes. So again, we've seen that constant migration over the course of the year from folks from pay-per-use over to the pass products that we offer. And that results in about a $2.7 million drag on a year-to-date basis. Again, that 50% haircut by the state for reduced fare subsidy results in almost $14 million lost revenue on that line. Non-fare box totals did very well in 2019, and we see $5.5 million favorability on a year-to-date basis for that line. So overall, total revenues, we were down about $11 million for 2019. Again, not to point out the obvious, but if we would have received the reduced fare subsidy in total, we would have been in positive territory. So again, very important for us to receive all of the revenues from the state, whether that's the reduced fare reimbursement, the sales tax, or the PTF. Average fare up slightly, and then free rides were higher than we saw this time last year. December expenses, we see labor down, unfavorable to budget. Again, as we close out the books and make final accounting adjustments, those impact the various lines on a monthly basis. But we see labor down due to some of those adjustments. Materials, we see positive favorability there. Fuel and power, again, about $500,000 positive on each of those lines. And then security services up about 2.5 due to some accounting adjustments and closing out the year, as with other expenses up $7.5 million. So overall, we ended up December with expense totals of almost $8.5 million, 8.4 favorable to budget. When you factor in the December revenues, we ended up the month of December up almost $14 million to budget. So a good result as we close out the books for the month of December. On a year-to-date basis, we see similar trends where we're slightly down but effectively flat to budget on labor as a percentage basis. Materials and the like are up. We end up the year up almost $42 million, favorable to budget with regard to expenses. That coupled with the drag that we had on a year-to-date basis for revenues, we end up the year on system-generated revenues to the positive of $31.1 million. Again, that is being offset, by the drag that we see on the larger economic growth of sales tax, PTF, and real estate transfer tax. When you net out those through year-end for PTF and real estate transfer tax, and through October for sales tax, we're up about $8 million. That $8 million will help us close flat to budget once you take into account the sales tax receipts that will come in November and December, and where they are expected to fall vis-a-vis the budget. So again, we're on track to close the budget for 2019 flat to budget, but again, it's very important for us to continue the efforts with regard to accruing all of the revenues that have historically flowed from the state. With the three commodities that we purchased, fuel, power, and natural gas, there was, the most recent increase that we've seen here is with regard to fuel for 2021. We're now at the historic percentage that we like to lock in for those future years at 85%. So again, we've been able to take advantage of decreases in market pricing for fuel over the last month or so.
Can you explain how did we do it, to increase that much the variance?
So again, with regard to year-to-date numbers,
Not year to date, maybe just the month of December.
so the month of December, both on the revenue side and on the expense side, we saw, good with regard to revenues. We saw good weather. We've been able to benefit from that factor that helped us on the fare and pass totals. We also benefited from on the pass side of the house from the fact that 7-day and 30-day passes, which had heretofore been activated at the end of the month, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, were now being activated at the beginning of the month. So we got some tailwind with regard to our revenues, from that factor. With regard to expenses, as we do every year, we assume a certain level of expense factor throughout the year. If we're not hitting those, those kind of budgeted higher levels throughout the year, we get a little bit of a tailwind in the final month with regard to the December expenses as well. So again, the culmination of those two effects, the good weather, the timing of the pass activations, as well as, again, kind of controlling our expenses, and has benefited us, substantially. And when we're closing out the books for December, again, we had to battle through the whole year, because of the polar vortex creating a pretty big hole for us with regard to our revenues and our expenses at the beginning of the year. But again, with the help of the departments and controls put into place, we've been able to, kind of dig our way out of that hole, so that again, we're on pace to end up the year 2019 flat to budget.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, Jeremy. In terms of, because I think this is the second month in a row that we've seen sort of a positive variance as it relates to the fare box. I think last month you talked about one of the reasons that it was increased was due to the collecting of the dormancy fees. Does that also factor into this? And if so, how much of that is probably account for the 3.2 million positive variance?
So a predominant share of that is attributed to the fare totals this month. Again, that's a direct impact of, a longstanding policy here at CTA in the collection of those monies, particularly at the end of the year in 2019.
And would say kind of going forward, and I don't know if we've looked at December numbers, but you got to figure over time that will taper off.
That will taper off over time.
The other one I wanted to mention, the 1.8 million in terms of non-fare box. If you were to break that out with some of that grants, what accounts for that 1.8 million dollars?
So there's some grant impact in there, but the predominant share again is we've been able to continue to grow our non-fare box revenue lines, whether it be the advertising, concession, and the like. But there is, as we've gained from time to time different grants, those grant totals show up in that line as well. It's a couple $100,000 for this month, but again, we've been able to continue to grow overall revenues in the non-fare box totals.
Okay, and then my last question, the reduced fare subsidy. I think we talked about it last year that going forward in 2020, we wouldn't show it because, again, we didn't get any legislation to provide relief. Is that going to be the case when we see January? This won't show up as, I mean, we will continue to try to pursue it, working with the RTA and all of that, but it won't show up monthly as it currently is.
Correct. This is the last month that will show a negative variance, assuming that there's no further cuts, to that line item as part of our budget discussion on a monthly basis. We baked that $14 million haircut into the 2020 budget, but as to your point, we will not continue to let that go with regard to our efforts downstate and letting the legislature know how important those funds are to us.
Can you talk a little bit more about the dormant accounts?
Sure. There's in the terms and conditions with regard to the venture card system, if there's funds that are dormant in an account over 18 months, those funds are able to be swept into the general revenue as if they were being used on the system. So again, that's all part of the original terms and conditions of the program. And again, we're just trying to clean up as we move forward with the implementation of Ventura 3.0 and other programs, trying to clean up old accounts. I mean, these are years and years old accounts that we're cleaning up right now.
So does that mean, okay, the next year, okay, is going to help us also?
As the chairman had indicated, the benefit kind of tails off after the first initial impact, but it will have an ongoing effect if there's dormant accounts that continue to pop up.
But everything that you have right now, okay, is being accounted for.
There's still a tail that will continue for the future months ongoing. But again, the bulk of it, because it has to do with Chicago card transition, the bulk of it has been accounted for.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious, so obviously 2019 we started off a little rough in January, February. Would you give us a sneak peek of January?
So, Mike Conley can probably give a little bit more robust discussion with regard to overall ridership, but again, we have not seen kind of the dramatic effect on ridership in general, that we saw in the first couple of months of last year because of the weather.
So, as Jeremy said, the polar vortex really was a big game changer for us in terms of ridership, and it took a couple months to get past that. We did have 2 months of very, very nasty weather last year at this time, and we've seen the rail and bus ridership sort of rebounding from that loss through the course of the year here. We think that what we've seen going on is a leveling off of the ridership losses that we had seen in 2017 and 2018. So we're optimistic about what will happen in the future with the ridership. We're anxious to see what will happen as the changes to the cost for ride hailing take effect and potentially change people's behaviors a little bit. So we're monitoring that.
Yeah, and for better lack of word, I know that we've been talking about additional marketing linked to corporations and things like that. So have we seen any kind of an impact in that area, or kind of what are the plans moving forward?
So over the last several years, we've seen about 300 firms a year added to the totals in our transit benefit program. So that total now is 15 to 1,800 total firms incorporated in the transit benefit program. So we've seen that grow from only a couple of hundred as recently as probably about 4 years ago to almost 2,000 now. So again, we've seen tremendous growth in the number of small firms in particular that are participating in the transit benefit program, which is a benefit to them as a corporation with regard to the taxes that they pay, their employees getting a tax-free rate on the passes. So we've seen, again, not only the effect of the most recent fare increase having an impact on the base, but which has pushed people into passes, but also the pushing of this transit benefit program and the benefits of the transit benefit program have definitely kind of continued on, people migrating to the pass product. And you've seen that in the fact that we've seen pass totals on a monthly basis continue on 2 years after a fare increase. That is very abnormal. Traditionally, you see once a fare increase has gone into effect, that the migration from base fare, pay-per-use to pass products only lasts a year, if that. But the fact that we've gone into the second year, again, is a testament to the fact that we've done a good job of attracting, businesses to come to the transit benefit program, both small and large, as well as, just getting the message out there to individuals that, hey, if your business, if the company that you work for is not offering this, push from the ground up, as well as our efforts to push from top down.
And I know that tourism has increased as well, and so that also pushing on new programs to try to attract. I know we've done more here.
Mm-hmm.
The airports.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about what else you've got planned that might be new and innovative for this year.
Sure. We continue to push, whether it be at the airports or, for special events. I think that, we've done a good job of coordinating with special events. For example, like the All-Star Game, we worked very closely with the NBA to get, brand recognition out there as part of that effort. The NBA actually incorporated into their logo for the All-Star Game essentially the L system, the L map in the colors of the lines. So again, it's just kind of brand recognition, getting the name out there, and again, kind of trying to capitalize on folks coming into the city that they ride the L to and from the airports and around the city while they're here. So we've done a good job with that, with that event, and with mainstays like the marathon and whatnot. But again, it's just continuing the conversation with businesses, with people, with World Business Chicago, with Choose Chicago, as they continue to market the city to new businesses, to tourists, that we continue to get a toehold on the early front end of people's decisions, that it's important for them to make these decisions. Like the transit benefit program, the best time for that to be enacted is when a company is expanding or coming into the market, than trying to get them down the road. So again, I think we've done a good job of doing that. We'll continue to expand that effort, but again, we're just trying to increase ridership on the system, whatever that may look like, as well as other revenues, enhancing other revenues.
Have there been any recent discussions or considerations about adding fare capping as an option for pass holders? I mean, for card holders?
Well, I think that our passes act in a fare capping type manner. I know that fare capping is obviously a different type of strategy, but again, the passes that we offer allow folks to kind of set a budget as to what kind of modes of transportation through the CTA system that they can purchase through those passes. So again, we have two primary passes, the 7-day and the 30-day, that really act as the backbone and essentially kind of different payment plans for folks that want to access the system in a very large and kind of concerted way on a daily basis, and plus weekends and plus non-peak times.
To put a finer point on your question, Director Irvine, I think the answer is yes. When we've looked at fare adjustments, fare capping has been a part of that conversation. Fare capping is a fairly complicated discussion in terms of the risk loss associated with that. At this time, as Jeremy pointed out, we really have focused on our passes as a vehicle to really provide that type of incentive for ridership. But we do recognize that that's becoming more and more a topic of conversation in the industry, and obviously as we move forward, we'll continue to have fare capping integrated into discussions about things we should look at.
Thank you, President Carter.
Any other questions for Jeremy?
Maybe, I don't know if that's, it is a question, maybe for you, Mike. Do we do sort of return on investments when we invest in the stations? I'll give you a good example. I think early on when I became chairman, we were investing in the Wilson station. And I know since then you've had just incredible investments in the community itself. And I'm just trying to see, have ridership levels, do you track maybe prior to the reconstruction or the investments in those stations, ridership at that time versus, the return on the investment? Did we see an increase? Take example 95th Street. When I started here, I think averaging in that area about 20,000 riders per day. We've now invested $495 million in that station. Have we seen an uptick? One of the things that I have an opportunity to do is serve on the Plan Commission as chair of the CTA, and I've been, like I said, on that almost 10 years, and I can't recall, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, a meeting where something doesn't come up about the West Loop. And I know at the last meeting, Alderman Barnett mentioned the proposed Damon Lake Station, just because he just feels like the Morgan Station, which is probably less than 10 years old, or if it's not less, and it's right around 10 years old, how this just kind of busting at the seams. And again, that would be another one, like I said, I think 10 years of age, but again, ridership is increasing. Do you kind of follow that in terms of rail investments?
We do monitor the ridership after rail investments and try to track that in a way that provides some information for us in terms of making future decisions. You bring up Damon as a one on the Green Line. That is on the books, and that is going to go into construction within this next year here, 2021 and 2020 and 2021. And Morgan Station has grown so rapidly that it is now one of our top ridership stations, and that's a big change because that was a brand new station in that wasn't there before. So we have seen that. We've seen the effect as well in the South Loop with the McCormick Place station having opened down there, so that those infill stations do have a distinct impact. There's less of an impact with a rebuild, but we have seen a bounce with Wilson. Generally, there's a reduction in ridership while it's under construction because we change the entrances and exits. We limit people's access while we're doing construction, and then after the construction, we watch for that rebound and keep an eye on it. 95th is a good example of a station where the ridership hasn't increased exponentially by any means, but it's come back to what it had been before construction, and it's very, very solid. You know that station. You know that it's not just a rail station. It's actually a very large bus-to-bus terminal as well, and there's a lot of bus-to-bus activity in that station. So it is something that we track, and it is something that we monitor, and we have seen overall that where investments are made for public transit changes or improvements, that certainly the economic development follows those investments.
And one of the reasons I mention it is Jeremy continues to talk about we don't want to let the state off the hook in terms of the money that's committed to CTA. But I think one of the things is to show the data that every time we get $1, here's how it's multiplied and here's how development. So I was just thinking kind of going forward, just capturing that data and then we invest and then being able to share that with legislators about, hey, here's the importance of investing in transit. Here's why we need the money, because you can see every dollar we get from the state, we would multiply it 3 times, 4 times with all of the other development to take place.
Mr. Chairman, I will add that's exactly what we did during the capital program. We showed the return on investment associated with every dollar that we received, and I think it's one of the many arguments that resulted in a success in our ability to get the largest capital program in the history of CTA. Jeremy's conversation about reduced fare conversation is an operating budget issue, which doesn't generate the same dollar-to-dollar conversation, but still I think the broader point, which is a point I think that we do make and will continue to make, is that having a robust, healthy transit system has an overall economic impact to the region as a whole, and that is both an operating conversation as well as a capital conversation. So we will continue to make those arguments and work closely not only within CTA but also with the city, who, as you know, has become very strategic in their approach to development and aligning resources, be it CTA or others, to coordinate in ways that help revitalize communities going forward.
Any other questions for Jeremy? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the amendment and restatement of an easement agreement for property located at 1801 West Gray Street, Chicago, Illinois.
Good afternoon. Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Real estate staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing an amendment and restatement of an easement agreement for the property located at 1801 West Gray Street. On January 11, 2013, the Transit Board approved the sales of surplus property at 1801 West Grace and the retention of a 4,271 square foot easement for access to CTA's Grace substation under Ordinance Number 13-3. The current owner, Adjacent Property Capital LLC, is planning to redevelop the parcel and seeks the authority's approval to amend and restate the easement. The new agreement will provide a new easement area of 7,603 square feet. The grantor has also agreed to sell an existing structure on the easement area to the CTA for $10 and permit the CTA access to dismantle and remove it. I will be happy to take any questions at this time.
Any question, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
Second.
Our final order of business today is the review of 16 purchase and sales award recommendations. Presenter Helen McCormick and JB.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Let's start with contracts number A1 and A2. Any questions?
Yeah, on A1, and I'll give you a chance, Alan, to get to it. I think the last contract had a DBE percentage to it, and I noticed this one does not. Is there a reason why there was no DBE participation in this one? Because I think the last contract on the Cooper Bearing Inc. had a DBE component to it.
The last contract, Mr. Chairman, had a achievement of less than 2%. When we did the calculation, it came out to less than 1%. Finding, the only real opportunity on this is for subcontracting is the trucking. And again, the trucking can be difficult if you're getting it from out of state, to get a local DBE firm to go out of state and to bring it back to Chicago. Again, having a less than 2% attainment and a less than 1% calculation on it, we decided to go with a 0% goal.
Yeah, I kind of looked at it. I mean, while the parent company is out of Atlanta, Motion Industries is right over here on Jefferson. It's right here in the city. It's 1361 South Jefferson Street. So again, I looked at it. That's why I was a little bit curious. I'm like, well, at least they have a Chicago office, and if you've got a Chicago office, you don't worry about bringing things from out of town. And I'm assuming that it's coming right out of this location, which happens to be not far from here.
Agreed. Yes, it's like I said, when we did the calculation, it came out less than 1% and having a less than 2% attainment. Last time when we talked to the firm about why they weren't meeting their 2% goal, last time it was just the trucking was not enough of a portion of the cost that they were charging CTA for the product to get to 2%. And that really is the only subcontracting opportunity is the trucking.
Only thing I would say going forward, you don't have them anymore here, so we have a new opportunity to have a bite at the apple with the new contract. just saying around motion industry, but now we're not motion, but Cooper Bearing. But we had an opportunity, a second bite at the apple with motion industry, especially with it being here in the city and right down the street. So, like I said, I think just kind of going forward, especially with local companies here, if we're doing business with them, we should really push them to be aspirational when it comes to DBE participation.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. Just because we have a 0% goal doesn't mean that we won't stress with this company our commitment to DBE opportunities, and if there is a chance for us to get some DBE participation on this contract. Obviously, at the time that we created the goal, we didn't know who was going to ultimately get the contract, so we weren't in a position to know whether a local firm would get it or not. But we can certainly go back to that company now that the contract is being awarded and have a conversation with them about DBE opportunities, see if we can create something here beyond what we've identified as a 0% goal.
Any other questions for A1 and A2? Let's move to contracts number B1 through B4. Any questions?
So, Alan, first of all, let me just say to Dorval and the team, just a great job. I know this is one of those where now you've got an opportunity for some of the companies that would normally be subs on big projects. This provides them an opportunity to now be the prime.
Exactly.
So I know that's something that has come up time and time again in terms of meeting with DBEs, is how do we move from being a sub to actually bidding on actual work. So just a great job in terms of finally making this happen and getting it to this point. That is excellent.
Yeah, I thought that was great too. Is there, so are we thinking there's an opportunity for most to come to you for categories? How does that work?
Yeah, we've already identified and done some advanced pre-bid meetings where we've identified opportunities in geotechnical, survey, and architectural and with certain projects that we've identified in the state capital program. So even opportunities that we would generally go to our larger GEC for full design services, geotechnical and survey, we would go to these firms in advance to get those sources done so we can start to prepare those larger packages. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for this to be used throughout.
Now we're able to just go direct instead.
Absolutely. That's another great gain on this is historically we would have gone to a major GEC firm who would have subbed a lot of that survey or geotechnical to a DBE. And now we'll be able to actually go to those DBEs direct and save some of that overhead from those GECs.
And that is something we look at when we determine the number that we'll approve for each category. We don't want to approve so many that they aren't going to get the work.
Right.
We can't guarantee who's going to get what work, but we try to make it so it's realistic that they do have a possibility to get the work, and that's why we limit the number because they do pay for insurance and
No, that
everything.
makes sense. And we, recognize some of these people?
Oh, yes.
Yes, all the firms that are being recommended except Studio ARQ have done work for CTA before.
And on this kind of task order, so this is something we're looking at more? Possibly.
Yeah, we continue to work with purchasing and the user groups to find opportunities for task order-based contracts where we know that small businesses can participate either as a set-aside or with our task order-based goals, like on the large GEC contract. Although we have two DBE primes in the pool, we will continue to assess DBE goals on a task order by task order basis.
It's great. We love some capabilities.
So I've got a question on
Go ahead, please.
on B3.
B3.
Yeah, what would be helpful just in terms of, one, Ellen, if you could explain, that the previous contract was 6.8, the current contract is 8.2. Just talk a little bit about the increase was due to.
Sure. One of the main reasons why this has increased significantly is because the real estate department anticipates that JLL will be receiving commissions on future large ground leases. There are approximately 4 that we anticipate they will be able to receive commissions on.
And here's what I would hope kind of going forward, and I don't know if we can do it, because these are 5-year contracts. So if you go back, I'm assuming that the contract is coming out, this ending was a 5-year contract. So I'm always interested in looking at how companies who work for us, how they perform over time. So let's say, for example, kind of tracking. I think, I know they've done a great job in terms of leasing up, but I think from a visual standpoint, it helps us to see year after year as, Jeremy comes up and gives us the budget update with Fairbox. It's just great to be able to see that companies that we're outsourcing things to and doing work with, how they're growing our revenue over time, especially with something like this where it's non-Fairbox.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to share some of those stats on this contract. We're well aware of the production. They've been a pretty strong performer for us over their terms of their contract, both on what they've helped us understand market and how to reposition ourselves in the most strong position. Ultimately, they have grown our share in those markets and our revenue streams, as Jeremy's talked kind of in his financial report. A lot of the thriving we're seeing in any budget gains are tied to this non-fare box revenue, which is part of the reason we're adding capacity for commissions. Ultimately, though we pay out in commissions, we see a growth in revenue. It's a positive thing for us in the end run.
They've done a great job. I'm just saying because the contract is so long, it's a return on the investment. It's just always great to see that visual of we were at 10, brought this company in, they've now taken it from 10 to 40 or 40 to 50 million over a 5-year period. And so you're before the board saying, hey, let's do another 5 years because we think we can continue that momentum. That's just, like I said, they've done a great job because I've heard you come before the board and talk time after new leases and new revenue, new things they're doing. I'm just saying when the contract is up 5 years, it would be just great to be able to do a look back and just see how it's performed over that 5 years.
Understood.
We can look to add that language to our board recommendations.
Yes, so the DB that they have is going to perform management of the retail concession spaces. So when they're empty, being advertised for leasing, they're going to manage the spaces. In talking with Jones Lang LaSalle, we've also asked them to look at DB firms that do brokerage to bring them into their pool. So they have made a commitment to look into that. So we'll connect with them once this contract is in place to see how they can add those DB firms to their pool.
Well, because that seems to be, I mean, this is such a great opportunity, I think, right? And it's good to look at brokerage firms, and it would be great to see that increase and for more of that type of work. I mean, I know that we're growing all, I think we're talking about that with regards to the SBs and the DBs, but this would be great to see more of that, especially because these contracts are so
Right, and part of the challenge with putting a number behind it is they don't know who's going to sell, who's going to lease the property, so they can't commit to a specific percent on the brokerage part. It's going to be whoever gets the lease. So that's why they committed to bringing DBEs as part of their brokerage team to go out and find leasers for the spaces, but unable to commit to a percentage because of the commission.
Just want to say good job for at least bringing up the DBEs to become out of the program and out of the system. And at least we got, 2 this time around. We hope we can continue that. So just want to say good job.
Any other questions? Let's move to C1 and C2.
Can you talk a little bit, I know it's a small change order of $37,000, but in terms of C1, it looks like every year we've had to go out. Are you looking at doing this with multiple years with Bloomberg?
I believe they only allow 1 year. It is a subscription, but I can check on that for you.
Gina, you got any thoughts on these?
So with regard to the Bloomberg contract, as Ellen indicated, they do offer preferred pricing currently for governmental entities for 1 year only. We are talking to them to see if we can get some type of preferred pricing for a multi-year contract because it is a service that we will need going into the future.
Is it a reason why they capped it for government entities at 1 year? Is it they go up every year, the fee goes up or something?
It's a good question, and we're trying to drill down on it a little bit more. It's just their past practice has been that they offer that type of governmental preferred pricing at a 1 year standpoint. But again, we're having that conversation, and hopefully we'll get to a good place for a multi-year type contract at the preferred pricing type level.
Yeah, I mean, since it's not going away and it's going to be something you're going to constantly need, even if they, we reached agreement to say, look, let's do 3 years with a 2
Exactly.
in it.
Exactly.
That helps them, my point is they're getting to the same place. Whether they do it every year, they give us a 3 year. We're willing to put a 2%
Absolutely.
Are they not competitors for?
There's no competitor. There's competitors in the general landscape, but for the functionality that Bloomberg provides and what we need it for, it's in essence kind of the only service out there that's comparable, apples to apples service provider.
Any other questions? So let's move to contract D1. Any questions for D1? So let's move to F1.
Evan, can you talk a little bit about this change order?
Sure. So on this contract, we had previously brought to the board, two new contracts, one for drug collection services and the other for clinical toxicology. So what we did was we broke the previous contract into two contracts. We're now asking for an extension with the current contractor so they can help us transition into these two new, with these two new contracts.
And was that a 6 month? How long would they stay on to help with the transition? Or with this increase, how much time is it?
So,
That's fine. Mr. Chairman, it's a 3-month extension, so it just gets us into the first couple months of the year so we can complete the transition in the first quarter. So it's a critical function, and we want to make sure that there's overlap between the old contractor and the new contractor so that we don't see any disruption in service.
So if I'm looking, so it's at 330,000? Okay. And so if I divide that out by 3 months, it's about 110,000 per month.
and we were able to get the extension through a letter so that we can continue the contract.
Any other questions? Let's move to G1. Let's move to E1 through E4. Sorry.
Right, that's I-1 through I-4, right?
I1
Right.
through I4.
Yes, the RPM contracts.
Pablo, I think you said that with these, just the SPEs, no DBEs.
All the firms that have been awarded these communications contracts are also DBEs. We set them aside through our small business program, so DBEs and SBs can compete for them. But the contracts that we're awarding are to DBEs.
Are there opportunities to do this type of contracting, I guess, on other, in other areas? I mean, I think this is great that we're doing this, right? It's almost like reaching out even deeper into the community.
Yeah, so we continue to partner again with purchasing and the user groups to look at opportunities when we can break up contracts to make them easier for small businesses to bid on. We also reached out to the small business community and the technical assist agencies and asked them for feedback on how we put contracts out to bid. If there are items in the bid documents that we can make it easier for small businesses to bid on our contracts, we ask for that feedback so we can take a look at that internally.
This is a strategy that we'll be using in procurements going forward, and you're seeing it play out in a very big fashion here because of the size of the RPM contract, but it is something that we're looking at for other infrastructure contracts and other planning contracts where we may be looking at doing similar things like with the red line extension and others. So it is something you'll see occur elsewhere as we're able to isolate services that we know specifically can be beneficial to SBEs, and where we know that we have a market of qualified firms who can actually bid on it, separate from packaging it all together to a bigger contract.
We've continued to grow the number of SBEs we do every year since its inception.
Any other question? Let's move to contract number J1. If there is no further question, may I have you to place these 16 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion? Okay, if there are no further question, may I have leave to place these 16 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
We've got that done. We just need the
Since there
final
is no
motion.
further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
May I have a second?
We've got one.
Will the secretary call the roll?
Yes. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson. Reverend Jakes.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion to approve the omnibus is passed with 6 yes votes.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't think it's quite 2 o'clock yet, is it? Maybe a few minutes yet?
5.
What's that?
It's
2
4
minutes?
minutes.
5 minutes. We have a 5-minute break.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for February the 10th, 2020. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller,
Here.
Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Alvarez Rosales. Reverend Jakes.
Here.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
We have here, Judge Shelby will not be here today, but we have a quorum of the board with 6 members present.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is public comment. Greg?
Yes, sir. We have one public comment speaker here today, Mr. Garland Armstrong. So I will ask Garland to please step forward.
Well, let me just welcome Garland back. You look fit and fine. I know you had some medical issues, but we're glad to see you and glad you were able to make it to the board meeting today. So welcome back.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been a long time after I had the eye surgery and the detached retina in my right eye and a torn retina in my left eye. So it's emotional to see y'all back again at the board meeting. And thank y'all.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
It's good that you can see us.
Thanks. Now, I was at Cumberland CTA train station and I took some pictures. So I bet y'all got the pictures of it. How, especially the island is where the bus is. Like when they come from the train going to the 81W, the pace buses 331, 290, 240, and 241. How they have to go all the way to the end and get that ramp out very steep. And also, my biggest concern is for small people, they would have a hard time getting up on that island to get on the CTA bus or train. And also, too, just would like to know when are they going to start the construction on that part over there on the bus part. And then I also took some pictures, too, of the stairwell, how it's eroding when they're going up and when they're going up to catch the train or coming from the train on the north part and the south part of it. So I took some pictures of it, and I just want y'all to know when they're going to start that construction on it so it can be complete. So the ADA and the general public would like to know when it's going to be the start construction so the word of mouth can spread around so that people will say, wow, it's long overdue after more than 10 years and it's still eroding and fading. So just would like to know when they're going to start that construction on it because it still hasn't been done or nothing.
So, Dorval, is this something that someone in Capital Construction can speak with?
Yeah, Bill Mooney, our Chief Infrastructure Officer, can talk to you about the timing for when we'll be moving forward with improvements. As you know, Mr. Chairman, this station, along with a large number of other stations, still have a lot of work that needs to be done. We have a $13 billion need to get to a state of good repair, and while I've gotten $2 billion from the state to certainly put a dent in that, it certainly does not cover all the work that we need to do. So we are still challenged with sort of how to basically prioritize and move improvements forward. Having said that, I certainly would like to answer your question, and I think that we talked to Bill Mooney. He can give a sense of when this particular station has been identified for improvements, and what that would take and how much that would ultimately cost for us to do.
Yeah, and the only thing I was just thinking, one of the things we might be able to do, especially on the accessibility piece, talking with Bill, let's say again, as you mentioned, we've got 13 billion in need, and we only got 2 billion. So again, don't know when we would have the capital to do it. But what we might be able to do is take a look at how much would it cost in the interim to deal with the ADA accessibility issues.
We can look at all that, although I do want to be clear about one thing. The station is accessible.
Okay.
We're talking about improving the accessibility features, which is similar to what we did at the Jefferson Park Station.
Okay.
When we did the work there. We actually cut ramps into the elevated portion of the platform that allow our customers to actually go up onto the platform. The problem with this current configuration is that you can't get up to the platform. You have to actually have the bus pull into the cutaway area to actually deploy the ramp and allow our disabled customers to get onto the bus. So we could certainly look at what that feature alone would cost us. Okay. I know it would be less than what we spent on Jefferson Park. There's a whole lot more work that we need to do in this area beyond just that, but certainly I can get you a number for that and let you know what it would take to do that.
And where is this?
It's on the northwest side before you go out to O'Hare on the Kennedy Expressway.
It's at our Cumberland station, which also has a park and ride lot associated with it, and this bus turnaround is adjacent to the parking garage. Yes,
Well, Garland,
2 stations before you get to it.
stations.
Right.
Garland, I just want to thank you and Heather for being such active users of all the transit in the region, and for doing so much to advocate for not just accessibility, but just improved conditions for all riders. So I mean, a lot of riders use the system and they may complain, but they don't do anything about it. So we really appreciate you taking the time to raise these issues, bring in photos, and continue your your zealous advocacy. So keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
You take these on your iPhone?
Yes,
These are pretty good pictures.
that's right. And at the end, I just want to, it's like I want to give you, I wish y'all could give me a thank you hug for welcoming me back, because I feel like I'm being part of after being absent, so
Absolutely. Welcome back.
thank you.
And thank you. And Garland, in terms of your schedule, which is busier than anybody else in this room, you meet with Bill soon after the meeting. I know you're coming back to give me something tomorrow if you want to do it. So whatever works for you, you can meet with Bill.
All right, Greg.
Thank you. And that concludes public comment, Chairman.
The next order of business today is the approval of the January 15, 2020 board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comments? Hearing none, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of January the 15th, 2020.
So moved.
And second. Okay. Reverend Miller, abstain, and Reverend Jakes, you're going to abstain.
Abstain, right.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes.
Director Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes and 2 abstentions.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is executive session. It is my understanding that there will be no executive session today, Karen? All right, thank you. The next order of business is board matters. It is my understanding, Greg, that there are no board matters.
That's correct, sir.
All right. Our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget, Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this afternoon. The committee reviewed the finance report and approved the January 2020 committee minutes. The committee reviewed one ordinance, an ordinance authorizing the amendment and restatement of an easement agreement for property located at 1801 West Gray Street, Chicago, Illinois, and 16 contract award recommendations. The committee approved the ordinance and all 16 contracts, placed all of them on the omnibus for approval, and recommended for approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So move.
Second.
Second. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez.
Yes.
Reverend Jakes.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is construction report, Bill.
I think Mr. Mooney's outside talking with Garland. So he
We're
may
going to
be-
grab him. He's someone's
Okay.
gonna-
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and with me today is
Chris Bouchel, RPM Chief.
Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs.
So we'll begin kind of where we always do with our East Lake, Milwaukee, Illinois substation upgrade. The project remains on schedule and on budget and quickly coming to a close. As I've mentioned in the previous months, all the major work within the substation proper is complete at this point. The focus has been on installation of the duct bank that brings the traction power out of the substation, connects it to the right-of-way itself, or in our rail trains and the third rail. So this first picture here shows you the installation of the traction power cables that are going to be ultimately coming out of that duct bank and going up to the structure itself, connecting to the third rail and allowing that power to flow out of the substation. This next picture shows you the installation of that duct bank, which is subgrade, and it comes out underground from underneath the substation, goes out into the street, and then goes up a riser along one of the columns of the structure, and ultimately those cables feed out into the right-of-way. Here you can see the ducts actually being installed with a reinforced rebar cage that ultimately is, there's a series of concrete that's poured over it.
And Bill, before we move on to the next one, so you're still looking at March 8th?
Yes, sir.
As a substantial completion?
We are charging towards March 8th. So, this has been a challenging kind of piece of work, this little piece of duct bank, but we joke about the project manager being kind of our lucky rabbits, but every time he seems to take a setback, he's able to be creatively work around it with his team and keep it on target. So, and here's kind of the last piece. So up at the track level, then you can see that stand. That stand has a series of mechanical switches that ultimately are cabled back to that duct bank, and we can isolate power from the third rail itself to that substation there mechanically. So our next project is our Jefferson Park Signals project, which remains on schedule and on budget. As I've been talking, we kind of moved out a lot of the field work, and we're more into the fabrication of that equipment in the factories, which you'll see kind of in the upcoming pictures as we advance towards a spring installation for some of this work. Last month I showed you kind of the early core of the shell at Jefferson Park, which is the first relay house that will be going in. Here you can see the racks of equipment that have been installed and wired from there. This is a very tedious process, fabricating these houses, and ultimately wiring. It's checked and rechecked again, and ultimately put through a series of fail.
Are you doing this in-house or is this an outside firm?
This is an outside firm. So this is actually at a signal manufacturer's supplier.
And I think I've asked the question too. What is the warranty on this?
Oh, so the product itself will have a lot of redundant. So depending on what evolves, so there's typically a year on manufacturer warranty and parts and labor and things like that. But because it is a sole source supplier, signal manufacturers, and they have safety cert cases, if we do identify issues with their product, we do get a lot of support throughout. We have blanket contracts for supply parts as well, and they will regularly work with us if we've identified flaws in their product, because they're ultimately the ones that have the engineered case that have to defend the safety on that product. And so we've had issues from time to time with any one of these manufacturers' products. We've been able to send boards or other components back. They'll retrofit them and give them back to us. So.
These annual inspections or something like that?
Oh, so they have monthly inspections. They have so our signal maintenance program is exceptionally robust. It has monthly, quarterly, annual, biannual inspections depending on the type of it. Various components of this go actually be into test racks and are actually physically tested and tested electrically to fail. And all these are designed to fail safely. So if there is an issue with it, that it fails in a manner that allows us to protect our customers and the riding public as a whole. There's a very robust industry standard to this that we by
Just curious, life expectancy.
30 years on a signal system is a typical industry, 35 years. We will run every bit of that, if not more, depending on it. High use could see a little less. And here's the next round of houses in fabrication. So there's kind of a two-part fabrication process here. Is one, the shell of the house itself, which actually goes through a series of testing, waterproof and otherwise, to ensure that it is sealed and sound, and then the equipment that ultimately gets installed in that house. So this is for Foster. My next project is Grand Chicago Division, which is coming to its completion in the upcoming months. It remains on schedule and on budget. Work continues to progress here, and we've actually started making progress at surface level. And the first picture here is the new stairway canopies being installed at Grand. There's also a stairwell at Chicago that has started to see the canopy installed for that stairwell. These are typically what we call head houses or hats kind of as the entrances. Very focal. These had no prior kind of coverage over them. They were open stairwells, so the elements came down into the station, curb line splash over and things like that. They also are great identifiers from approach as you walk up on a station. Really calls them out. As many of you are aware, in the kind of the downtown State Street, they stand out very noticeably as part of that identifying feature of the CTA.
Is the station still open during this renovation?
Yes, so all this work is occurring kind of in two phasings. There's a series of weekend single tracks that I've shown you images of as we've done topping slab work and stuff like that, and we close one of these three stations during those weekends, and we bus customers around that. And then they're allowed to close a portion of the mezzanine or any one of the individual stairwells. There's multiple stairwell entrances to these stations for a period of time, and then rotate kind of through the station. So the station functionally remains open for the most part to customers.
When this is taking place, and you must bus customers around, are they being bussed around for free?
So they are free shuttles. So they would get off at a Blue Line station or would walk up to Chicago in this case, which may be closed, and get board a free shuttle bus to take them to the closest station where they could get back on rail service, and they would pay for their ride at the rail station at that point.
So then, Mr. Chairman, just a question, would that then add to the number of free rides? Because when we looked at the number of free rides, it was considerably higher.
Yeah.
During the month of December, would that be considered free rides?
No, I think.
It actually-
Because the free rides, when you see it a little bit higher, that's almost a mandate by the state. This would be something of trying to address an inconvenience that we're causing. I don't think that gets factored in the free rides.
Actually, it does. All of the free rides are factored in. So when we provide bus shuttles, those are free rides that we count as our overall free ride category. Yes, because we're still providing the free ride.
It's only to the next station to get paid.
Yeah, it's not. So the number that you get in Jeremy's presentation is intended to just reflect the subsidy impact of the reduced fare program. It's also intended to give you a sense of all the free rides we provide throughout the system for any number of reasons, including shuttles around construction, or sometimes we have emergency service disruptions where we have to provide free bus service, what we call bus bridges to move people around. All those rides get captured as part of the budget process. From Jeremy's standpoint, there's either a paid ride or a free ride, and there's nothing else in between.
Good question. Good question, Director Jakes. I had no idea that if we caused the inconvenience, we still consider it to be.
And it's going to be completed when? What is your completion date?
So we're looking at April for all three stations. So this next picture shows you under the recent shutdown at Chicago for one of those weekend closures. They got in and did the stairwell tile. So there is only one stairwell from the platform to the mezzanine proper, though there are multiple stairwells that they've been able to work around. So during one of those weekend closures, they had to get in, deal with that stairwell tile upgrades there. You've seen similar work at Grand and Division. Here at Division, you're seeing actually the topping cap on that stairwell. Kind of you get a sense of that finished product of that area now that's been staged through. So the next project is the last of our Your New Blue Phase 1 projects that I'm bringing forward to the board. This is the smallest of the packages, which is a $7 million total project budget and $2.5 million construction contract to John Burns for a light rehab of the Logan Square station. The rehab includes painting, lighting upgrades, some railing enhancements, roofing on the head houses or those entrances replacement, and separately as part of this project, we're working with our elevator maintenance contractor. We've come in, we're actually refurbishing both the elevators at this station. So they get a full replacement of the cab and the mechanicals associated with that. So the project remains on schedule and budget. It's a very short, kind of lived construction project as has a light scope, directly impactful with the painting and the lighting. You'll see over the upcoming months the elevator rehabs and some of the roof work roof is kind of seasonal. The elevator is in fabrication right now, and so you'll start to see some pictures of that elevator work coming forward. But here's kind of the first round of work. You can see here they power washed the walls completely down with a cleaner, and they actually are now priming and coating the ceiling with a fresh coat of paint. And as part of there's long 54-hour single tracks that have occurred to facilitate this work, and they installed a series of chaseways for new LED lighting at the high mast ceilings. Here you can see kind of that new lighting being prepped and installed for actual fixtures. So, my next project is our electric bus en route charging station. This project remains on budget and tight to schedule. And we've been advancing work at both Chicago and Chicago-Alliston, where the infrastructure components at those locations are entirely complete at this point. And we're waiting on the technology, which is currently in fabrication. So they have these new high fast mass chargers and kind of the apparatuses that it connects to in the electrical side of the building, which are in fabrication. We've been working with the manufacturers as first and kind work for us and on a safety case and making sure it meets a standard that we're comfortable with in the long run. So here's kind of that completed project at Chicago-Austin, the new electrical equipment that ultimately provides the service to those charging stations when they're installed. And then here's kind of the outside turnaround that's been completely finished at this point. The new building has new sight lighting. And I'll turn it over to Chris. Yes.
I have a question. So, before we go further, so with regards to some of the renovations to the stations that we're looking at, I'm not sure where this question fits, but I know that we had talked about some projects where we would be adding additional art, to that, and then are we looking at those types of projects again, looking at local artists and possibly seeing sort of maybe some of these stations that you're talking
Yeah, Chicago Austin actually has a commissioned art piece that will go there. It has a combination of both kind of a structured ornamental sculpture that gets attached to the building, as well as the artist is envisioning a bus turnaround kind of windbreak that will be artistic as well, and that will probably tail towards the end of the project, but you'll see some images of that. CTA has a committed set aside on all these projects to, as part of its budget, to support the art program. Grand Chicago Division has set aside areas that are envisioned to be part of our Lightbox program, and they'll be installing a series of rotating exhibit light panels where we work with artists on original work that they've done to be repurposed in these light boxes, basically prints of it. That's at Grand Chicago Division. As we've worked to incorporate art in all our stations, even ones that that have been long existent, like the Orange Line or the Green Line, where we haven't come in through with recent construction projects. We've been working on this model where we can install these light boxes and work with local artists or other people to display their artwork in print form. They're shorter term exhibits that we can rotate in and out of the program. And so Grand Chicago Division is envisioned to have that space available, and we're working with a couple artists. I can't get too far into the details at this point, because we're still actually working on that procurement itself. And I'm certainly glad to bring forward just kind of some other images from the art program and some things that are going on in the background. One of the construction reports 1 month, and kind of give you a look ahead of kind of what's been going on with art outside the major projects.
I think the broader answer to your question is yes, we still continue to incorporate art into our construction projects where feasible. And as Bill indicated, we put aside money as part of the art program to incorporate into these various projects we move forward. So yes, even though it doesn't get mentioned as a part of the report, that is a part of the overall strategy for art in the system. We actually work with the communities in developing the concept for the art once the artist is selected, and so the community does play a role in that process in terms of developing what the final piece of art will be.
The RPM Phase 1 design build contract remains on schedule and on budget. Major activities include continuing to advance design on various fronts. So while we are still putting in the foundations, for example, for the bypass, we continue to complete the design of some of the track and signaling features that will be on top of it. In addition, we're continuing to complete the design for signaling throughout the project, as well as some of the advanced work that will occur in the installation of 2 interlockings to the north and the south of the LBMM segment. In terms of construction, as I mentioned, we are in the process of installing various foundations for the bypass. Those are the big caissons that we're drilling into the ground. You'll see a number of pictures of that if we can maybe advance to those. So you've seen a couple photographs of this, but these are the drills that we use to put the shaft down into the ground. Subsequently, if we go to the next slide, we tend to put a liner in there. That liner, in some ways, is structural. In other ways, keeps the ground around it from mixing with the concrete, depending on the circumstance. And then the next one, you can see the installation of rebar cages. So this is progressing throughout the project. We started a couple of these caissons in the area of Belmont, then we kind of moved a little bit to the north and the west, and now we're coming back towards Belmont again with the installation of those. We're also installing micro piles in various areas. This is something we're doing both to the existing structure as well as some of the smaller foundations throughout the project.
Chris, I've got a question. How much has most of the utility and cable work been done with those companies, or ComEd and Comcast, or any of the cable? Are they still on site?
So if we get to the advanced contracts, the advanced utility work is on budget and tight to schedule, but not in a way that would impact the larger design build effort. If we kind of go to some of the photographs, we can see the heavy civil work is really wrapping up right now. That'll wrap up in this quarter, and that's really the removal of poles, the construction of these duct banks, which go underground. They take the above ground utilities and put them underground. And if we can go to the next slide. Now what we're going to be completing is running the cabling. So this isn't the actual cabling itself. This is the stuff that goes into the ducts. But we're in the process of working with the various, mostly communications companies to do that. AT&T is a general rule. ComEd as a general rule is advancing this work ahead of the communications companies, and the communications companies are now starting to run their interduct and will subsequently be running fiber and other things as we move forward. So this work will generally continue through the summer of this year, and kind of in coordination in some places with the design build contract, but generally significantly ahead of any impacts to that project.
Question, and I'm just looking at the AT&T the slide where you've got the work. Are those, because I know in some of the neighborhoods, people enter their garage and their homes through the alley. Are those blocked off the entire day, or because sometimes the work gets started early in the morning, let's say 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, even before people can get out? How do they kind of manage, ingress, egress in the alleys for some of the?
So we are closing the alleys, and where we do have impacts to customers, we work with the alderman's office. We go locally to the specific alleys and put up notices that tell people that we're going to have the alley closed. I mean, it's really similar to what you would see on the street that says this area is going to be closed for tree work or for utility services. We do something similar to that in the alleys. So we work with the alderman. We have a very detailed advanced construction schedule that goes out to the alderman on a weekly basis. The alderman, particularly in Alderman Osterman's ward, where much of this work is occurring, that gets integrated into his weekly newsletter that goes out to his constituents. And then, like I said, we post construction signs that say that we're going to be working in that area and this section is going to be closed on the various garages as well as in the front of the house. So we want to make sure that we're getting both of them, because in some cases the folks who are parking in these garages aren't the people that are living there, right? You have landlords that have rented the front of the house and then they've rented the garage to someone different. So we put signs in both places to make sure we cover that. Generally speaking, we've had only minimal issues, and where we're closing an alley for a longer period of time, I'll add, we provide alternative parking. In the case in the area of the bypass, where we're doing heavy construction, not utility construction, but the installation of these columns and ultimately the bypass, we are closing that alley for an extended period of time. And in those circumstances, we provide the homeowners or the businesses with alternative parking. And actually alternative garbage pickup if that's an impact too.
And for those, for the area around the bypass, are you getting, I know you've done a lot of proactive stuff to educate people. Are you getting much community feedback now that the work has commenced?
Yeah, we work back and forth with the community. Some of the drilling that you've seen right there is done in close proximity to a number of homes and has involved not only alley closures but also street closures. So we're communicating very closely with the community around it. We generally have monthly meetings with the community directly, and then, as we said, we put up construction activity notices. We work with the aldermen to send out updates to their mailing lists or email lists. So I would say that we are in a position to talk back and forth with the community in a weekly, if not daily basis. We do get individual questions through our various email links that we put up there, and we endeavor to answer those as quickly as possible, always within 24 hours. Thank you. Keep going. So getting to that point, community outreach. So on the community side, we have had a series of meet the contractor meetings up in the 48th Ward. Those are very successful. We had a number of people come to those, both businesses as well as community members. We have met with a variety of community groups up there, the Chinese Mutual Aid Association. We've had various pop-ups. So we've started to go out to the stations with small groups and just have a T-shirt or a sign that says, do you have questions about RPM? Endeavoring to to get not so much to the people who go to meetings on a regular basis in the evenings, but just our average customers who are walking to and fro from the station. So those have been very successful as well. Some of the various types of outreach that we've described in the past is starting to be broadbanded as the impacts of construction increase as we're starting 2020 and doing, as I said, a lot of the work on the 2 interlockings that are on either side of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr section in particular.
So, Chris, the benefits have there been reoccurring themes that you've heard from the various meetings that have said that
Yes, Tammy Chase, Director of Communications for the RPM project. Yes, I would say there's a number of themes that continue to come up, which has been helpful in terms of shaping our outreach going forward. On the small business side, we have a lot of small businesses in the footprint, hundreds of small businesses who are very concerned about what happens when the stations close, what happens, how can people get to my business, I'm going to lose revenue, what are you going to do to help me, CTA? So we are crafting a whole small business effort based on some of that feedback we're getting. We also hear from residents a lot, and the main concerns right now have been access to parking. When is my street closing? When are you closing access to my garage? What are you going to do? And we say, well, okay, we're going to provide alternative parking. Well, how close is it going to be? Is it going to be safe? Is it going to be lit? Am I going to have to walk very far? I've got 3 children. So those are among the issues that continue to come up. So we have multiple ways of addressing them in terms of written materials, electronic materials, the block-by-block meetings that Chris referred to, and we continue to move forward with those as well.
Yeah, we really stress communication. Going beyond our regular practice of posting communication, construction activity notices, and providing more detailed reports to the community about where that work is going to occur so they can plan accordingly. So that has been the thrust of a big part of our effort. So moving on, I will to the last part of the 2 parts of these slides, and Juan Pablo's sections here for workforce and SBDB. We've also been busy on those fronts.
Thanks, Chris. As the year rolls on, we continue to have our monthly meetings with the contractor to make sure that we're on track, both on the DBE goal and the workforce goals. We will be participating in the City of Chicago Construction Summit, which is February 19th at Malcolm X College as part of the Chicago Careers Construction Council. It's an initiative led by the mayor's office to make sure that all the city departments and agencies are aligning resources and policy to drive this workforce initiatives forward. So we have included a workforce portion to the construction summit this year. We'll have 2 panels for individuals interested in entering into trades and a panel for contractors to understand these workforce goals on construction projects. So CTA will be participating and we'll be highlighting the opportunities on the RPM project. On the SBE DBE side, we held another session of our Building Small Businesses program on February 6th and 7th. We tried to get the picture in, but it was too late to get into the board book, so you'll see it next month. But we'll be continuing those sessions quarterly. We're having about 20 firms come out to each session. Leads to a good conversation about what is capital, how to use capital, how to leverage existing contracts and equipment to get more capital to grow the businesses. And we continue to work with the contractor on planning another outreach event based on their procurement schedule and the packages that they see coming in the next 6 to 8 months, so we can prepare small businesses to start bidding on these packages.
One final thing, Tammy and Juan Pablo, you may want to also mention the scholarship opportunity that just got announced last week as part of the RPM project.
Yes, this morning we were actually able to announce with Mayor Lightfoot the first Elevating Futures Scholarship Fund that is directly related to the RPM project. Walsh Fleur is funding $250,000 for 10 scholarships for CPS students who are considered disadvantaged in the poor areas of the city who want to pursue STEM-related careers. So they want to go to college for construction, engineering, etc. So we're really excited to announce this today. It's the first time we've done anything like this at CTA that anyone can recall. So more to come on that.
And it's part of...
So the nonprofit group that is managing the program for us, the third party, is called Chicago Scholars, and they do a lot of the mentoring work and working with, so they will be working closely in managing this program for us.
And it's part of our larger strategy about building awareness about the construction industry, right? It's not just the trades, but it's the engineering, the project management, so that's why we're focusing on the STEM fields.
So I think it's important to point out that this is part of the innovation that we try to build into our procurement process when we look for ways for our contractors to basically show how they're going to engage the community around our major projects. This is a wash floor concept, but that is one that they brought to us as part of the RPM, part of the RPM proposal to CTA. So this is an area where we really have taken advantage of the fact that we look at this as part of the overall proposal submitted to us and ultimately look for companies that are going to be innovative and creative in the ways in which they're going to support the communities in the major projects that we're pursuing.
Excellent. Great news. All right, are there any questions for our
Good job.
distinguished panel here? All right, thank you. Our next agenda item is new business. Greg?
I believe that Reverend Jakes would like to say a few words.
Just for information for some, last month, my mother passed unexpectedly at the age of 72, and I wanted to just thank the board in general and Reverend Miller specifically for sending someone there. I think it was your son that had come that morning, and Chairman Peterson. We had a conversation on the phone, and I got emails from you, and it just did my heart good when I looked up, and out of all of the flower arrangements, I had seen one from CTA, so thank you so very much. And then just also, because I don't like to be selfish, we had another of our CTA family that I found out through a mutual friend, and I went and offered my condolences to my fraternity brother back there, Steve Mayberry, because I found out his mother passed, I believe it was in December, early January. So went and offered my condolences. So I'm going to stop there so I don't start crying. All right, so thank you. But thank you so very much. It meant the world to me. Thank you. And thank you, Greg.
With no further Greg, any additional? Okay. With no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.